evening, church. As it is every week an honor, so it is an honor this week again to dive into the text and to look at some ideas and some thoughts from God's Word that might be beneficial to us as we live out our lives. I wish I could see you, but at least you can see me. We are praying for you guys. We are missing you guys. And we are just hoping that this pandemic will come to an end so that we can come see you face to face. We are busy with Trail of Trials, and tonight we are in Genesis chapter 25. If you've got your Bibles and you want to turn there so long, the title of this lesson is Mistake by a Meal. And it's really about Esau's fatal mistake under pressure. Now, the last lesson that we spoke about, that we dealt with, was in Genesis chapter 22. That's about Abraham taking his son Isaac on the mountain. That was a trial of note. And we're skipping a few chapters up to chapter 25, and I don't just want to miss what is said in those chapters, so I've just pointed out a few trials that also go on there, but it wasn't, in my mind, enough to do a lesson on. So to just ease us into chapter 25, let me just point out a few things that happens from the day that Abraham takes Isaac up the mountain to sacrifice him until the day that the story of Jacob and Esau graces us. And so the first thing that happens in that text is that Sarah dies. Sarah died. And this was obviously a trial for Abraham. You can imagine that you don't feel comfortable when your wife dies, especially if you've had a relationship with her in the way that Abraham had. However, not too long after that, we see that Abraham got married again. And now, I'll be honest with you, I have forgotten that, or I never knew that, but it was interesting for me to come to those terms. So Abraham had quite a few wives in his life, right? And there are two things that Abraham does when his wife passes away. Two important things. Number one, he mourns. The text says he mourns. He went to go mourn for her. And number two, he honored her. He specifically went and bought a burial piece of a land with a cave on it from the Hittites to bury his wife in. And he also got buried there when he did die. So that's the two things that he focused on. Maybe that's something... maybe that's about the best thing that you can do when somebody passes away. When you go through the trial of somebody you love that have passed away. There's not really much else you can do. You can't phone somebody. You can't really drink a pill to take away the pain. There's basically just two things you can do, is mourn and honor that person's life. Mourn means let the emotions out. And honor means positively focus on making the best of that person's life. And then we find the second sort of trial happening in those chapters, and that is Isaac finding his wife. That's a trial in itself, to find a wife for Isaac. And secondly, a father and a family having to let their daughter go to be the wife of Isaac. It's tough. That must be tough. I've got quite a few single friends, and it's really hard for them to find wives. I always thought it's ladies struggling to find husbands. In my life, it seems to be all the men, the godly men, can't find godly wives. So if anybody knows of ladies that are good godly ladies that won't mind marrying a South African guy, I can introduce them to some wonderful gentlemen. Just let me know. All right. But it must also be tough when a family has to release their child to the care of another man. Now, when Abram lost his wife, his attention turned towards helping his son find a wife, a good one. And so he sent his servant with that task. He said, I want you to go find a wife for my son Isaac from my own people. And that was a trial in itself for that servant. And I'd encourage you to go read that text. But how did he do it? Simply, he prayed about it and God provided. He prayed about it and God provided. But Rebecca's family found it great that some man from their family was looking for a wife, but it was also for them a trial. I mean, how do you let go of your daughter? How do you make such a difficult decision? Well, Genesis 24 verse 50 to 51 tells us so beautifully what the principle is. Laban and Bethuel answered, this is the text, this is from the Lord. We can say nothing to you one way or the other. Here is Rebekah. Take her and go. Let her become the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has directed. And what I see in this beautiful trial, as this family has to let go of their daughter, is the following. The lesson I learned. Anything from the Lord is a good idea. regardless of the pain it causes. Anything from the Lord is a good idea regardless of the pain it causes. In Afrikaans, we have a saying that goes like this: Een man se nood is 'n ander man se brood. Een man se nood is 'n ander man se brood. And it doesn't rhyme in English, but it basically translated means this: one man's need is another man's bread. Okay? The idea is this: Laban lost his daughter, but Isaac gained a wife. Laban lost his daughter, but Isaac gained a wife. Sometimes what we lose becomes someone else's gain. And that's a little bit encouraging, right? Our cry becomes somebody else's comfort. Our cry becomes someone else's comfort. Let me show you why. In Genesis 24:67, the text says, this is now after Isaac and Rebekah had met each other. Isaac brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah, and he married Rebekah. And so she became his wife, and he loved her. And listen to this: and Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. You see, Sarah died, but we never read about how Isaac felt about that. Isaac was 37 years old when his mother died. And here God provided a wife for him to bring him comfort. Isn't God amazing? Sometimes He comforts us in the most unexpected ways. Here God is reaching out to Isaac and blessing him with a wife. And so it was tough for Laban's family to let go of their daughter, but for Isaac it was a blessing, and it was a blessing from God. So we shouldn't despise those times in our lives where people leave us, or where things leave us, or where situations end and jobs end. If we walk in line with the will of God, we can always be assured that regardless of the discomfort, there's a great reason. Either somebody else is benefiting out of this, who is in line with God's will, or we are benefiting from it. And then we find another trial that takes place in these verses prior to the text for tonight, and that's that Abraham dies. We don't see mourning. The text says he lived a full life. Isn't it wonderful to die in your time? That's Abraham for you. And his two oldest sons went and buried him in the same place where Sarah was buried. And they call it the second holiest place in the world at this point in time. When you live your full life and you live your life in honor of God, there's really no need for people to mourn when you die. I would like to die like that. Anyways, and then Genesis chapter 25 hits us. It's the story of Jacob and Esau, their birth and their birthright dilemma. And I know there's been millions of lessons done about this, and it's not a text that is foreign to us. The relationship between Jacob and Esau is one of the most important themes in all of the scriptures. The Calvinists often use the story as projected by Paul in Romans chapter 9 to defend predestination. Okay? And the notion is this, that God chose Jacob and Esau just because He wanted to, without a reason, to become the heir of the promise. So God chose Jacob over Esau to become the heir of the promise without any reasoning. That's what Romans chapter 9 argues. That's where the idea of predestination comes from. But it's not true, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, God did choose Jacob over Esau before they were born. But the choice was based on foreknowledge. Okay, God knew before they were born that Esau would fall or fail in trial. And so the story itself is loaded with lessons. But the focus tonight will be on Esau and his trial that he fails and the consequences of that. So let's read the text together. Genesis 25 verse 19 to 34. This is the account of Abraham's son Isaac. Abraham became the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel the Aramean from Padam Aram, and sister of Laban the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. The babies jostled each other within her, and she said, "Why is this happening to me?" So she went to inquire of the Lord. The Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. The first to come out was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment. So they named him Esau. After this, his brother came out with his hand grasping Esau's heel, so he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah gave birth to them. The boys grew up, and Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was a quiet man, staying among the tents. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Once when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country, famished. He said to Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished." That is why he was also called Edom. Jacob replied, "First sell me your birthright." "Look, I'm about to die," Esau said. "What good is the birthright to me?" But Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore on oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. He ate and drank and then got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright. All right, just a few things here as we go through the text. The first few verses talks about Rebekah being barren. So there's barren Rebekah. And I find it very intriguing that God promised many children and the fatherhood of a great nation to great people like Abraham and Isaac, and they struggle to have kids. Isn't that interesting? You would expect that people who have that type of promises get pregnant like that. It's like God says to them, you will have many children, but then they don't get any children. And the lesson I learn here is this: just because it takes a long time does not mean that God will not fulfill his promise. Just because it takes a long time doesn't mean that God will not fulfill his promise. For 20 years, Rebekah didn't have a child. Now let that sink in for a moment. 20 years they tried having kids and they couldn't. Okay? The text says that Isaac had to pray. Okay? You would think that Isaac wouldn't need to pray, right? Because God had promised through his offspring that all nations will be blessed. If even Isaac had to pray, why should we not? Sometimes we think that God should just throw the things that we need in front of us. We don't have to pray about it. Well, if Isaac had to pray, then you and I think it's a good idea for us to pray as well. And what is interesting for me too is that the text seems to indicate that Isaac wasn't the one worried. It seems like his wife was worried. Isaac knew God would bring him a son at the right time. But perhaps Rebekah, maybe her faith wasn't there yet. The text seems to indicate that it was more his concern for her. Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes our partners take the trial harder than we do. Sometimes the person that you're married to is taking more strain than what you do. Therefore, we need to pray for them. Maybe it's a business issue that you might be going through as a family, or an illness issue. Think about your partner. Sometimes we get so occupied with how we are struggling with it that we forget that our partners really need us to pray for them. So I want to challenge you as a family or as a couple, if you are wrestling with something today, take this example from Isaac. Go pray for your partner. Move the focus off your own self, your own struggle in the trial, and go pray for your partner. So first of all, we've got barren Rebekah, and then it moves into the next section. We've got pregnant Rebekah. Okay, so Rebekah is going through some trials here, right? First, she can't have a child. Now, secondly, she's got a child, but she doesn't have one. She's got two. God gives her fruitfulness, right? She becomes pregnant, and it seems like she's experiencing pain and discomfort when these two babies within her are jostling about. And what does she do? She does the right thing. She goes to God. Ladies and gentlemen, there is always a reason for discomfort, but only by God can the reason be revealed. And she understood that. And so she felt strange. This is perhaps the first time the twins are born into this world. And so it's uncommon. And she's experiencing, oh my goodness, if this what it feels like, is this what it feels like to be pregnant? It's quite intense. God reveals to her that there are two nations in her womb that will be blessed in reverse order. It is as if God is warning her of future trouble between the siblings. And God's prophecy here is about the Israelites and the Edomites. The Edomites will serve the Israelites, and the Israelites will always be stronger. Isn't it wonderful to serve a God who knows the end from the beginning? And then you've got Jacob and Esau. They get born, as we read in the text. Esau is given the name that means hairy, right? But he also became known as Edom, which means red. The stew that Jacob had made was also red, and Esau's interest in it and him selling his birthright for it gave him the name Edom. I wonder if this is where the human race gets its idea from, that red is danger. That's why red is on our traffic lights, right? Anyways, Jacob also receives his name. And Jacob means he grasps the heel. And figuratively, his name means he deceives. So these names are apt. Jacob means he grasps the heel and he deceives. Esau means hairy, and Edom means red. And then you find the text tells us now the boys are growing up, they're getting older, and then you see that there's now you start to depict which one of these boys are more in favor with dad and which one more in favor with mom. Daddy's and mommy's boys. And I find it strange that there seems to be favoritism here from the parents. Wouldn't you think that's strange? Esau's a hunter, a man of the field, a hairy. He likes the outdoors. That's my type of man, my kind of dude. Jacob is plain. He's more intellectual, a meditator, sitting between the tents and reading books. Also my type of dude. I was laughing the other day. Rabbi Zacharias was talking about his wife. Now, Rabbi Zacharias is an apologist, and he passed away the other day, by the way. And I listened to one of his talks where his wife gave him a hug, and she said to him, "You've got the arms of a thinking man." Let that sink in for a moment. It's like he's a thinker. He's not a gymmer, so he doesn't really have muscles. And I see the same thing sort of here. Esau is the one with the muscles, and Jacob is the one with the brain. Okay? Just a side note here. Parental favoritism leads to sibling rivalry. Parental favoritism leads to sibling rivalry. And so we've got to be careful as parents to favor one kid over the other, because it creates issues between the kids. And that's what we see in Jacob and Esau here. I mean, these early couples in the book of Genesis can really teach us. I mean, we can find everything we need to know about parenting just in the book of Genesis. And then we get to the crux of this text, as Esau sells his birthright to Jacob. Now, I think we know the story quite well. There are three important questions that I personally have on this section. The first question is this: what is the big deal about birthright? Why did Jacob want it so badly? What was the story? It really doesn't bother me that my sister was born before me. And it really doesn't matter to me or my boys that Micah is older than Neo. You see, we live in a different culture and time. No wonder stories like these seem to not make sense to us. Now, the two main benefits under this system, this Jewish system, the two main benefits of birthright is the following. It's position and inheritance. Position and inheritance. First of all, position. The firstborn son inherited the leadership of the family and the judicial authority of his father. So the firstborn son becomes the new leader of the family and the family name. Okay? But it's also about inheritance. Deuteronomy 21 verse 17 states that the firstborn was also entitled to a double portion of the paternal inheritance. In Isaac's instance, this was quite huge, right? Because, I mean, Isaac was very wealthy. He had huge wealth. But I don't think that Jacob was really after that. I think Jacob was interested in becoming the family leader. He was interested in following in the footsteps of his father and grandfather's promise from God. Remember what God promised to Abraham and Isaac? That he would bless the whole world through them. That they would have many children as the sand on the seashores, the stars in the sky. That the whole world would be blessed. Right? And that the whole land of Canaan would be theirs. And he wanted that. He wanted to have that relationship with God. You see, God gave Isaac and Abraham privileges, promises, and responsibilities. And that is what Jacob wanted. The second question I have about this story is, why was Esau so desperate for red soup? Really? Or stew? Why was he so desperate for it? It seems silly that he would be willing to give up such a deep and meaningful position in the family for a bowl of soup, right? I suspect that we've always sort of misviewed what really took place in this story. We seem to look at it in a way of saying he was just hungry, and and he was just after his appetite, etc. But if you go look at the text, it seems to be a little bit more serious than that. The text says that Esau came in from the country famished. And that word famished means he was weary, he was tired, and he was about to faint. Verse 32 sheds light even more. He says, look, I'm about to die. Now imagine that. He says to Jacob, look at me, I'm about to die. If it was just about an appetite thing, if he was just feeling like eating something nice, he wouldn't have used those words. I don't think Esau was just tired from a day of walking or strolling down the bush. I reckon he was in the countryside for a couple of days. Perhaps he was hunting, and perhaps he was unsuccessful in his hunting. I think he was weak, and I think he was hungry, and I think he was literally about to faint. In that moment, his body spoke louder than his family responsibility. In that moment, with that weak body, his body spoke louder than even his inheritance or his birthright. He was not in an easy space. Let's give that to him. I think he was going through a difficult moment. Thirdly, if there's a problem with Esau's character, what is it? If there's a problem with Esau's character, what is it? The very last sentence in this text that we read, I think reveals the answer. It says the following: so Esau despised his birthright. Esau was not interested enough in the privileges and the blessings and the responsibilities that came from being the firstborn. We find here a direct rejection of the relationship between God and Abraham, between God and Isaac. Esau doesn't seem to be interested in that. Esau was not interested in having the same relationship with his God as Abraham and Isaac had had. Now I find the following character issues with Esau. There's 3 character issues that I think he had, character problems. First of all, he didn't have faith like his forefathers. He didn't have faith like his forefathers. Abraham was called the father of faith because he believed that God could raise Isaac from the dead even if he did kill him. Because why? God keeps his promises. And here Esau is saying, what will the inheritance mean if I die? You see, the story of death comes in again. In his mind, there were only 2 options: sell your birthright or die. Where's God in this equation? Okay, so you're the firstborn, you have these promises that are coming down to you from your father Isaac through Abraham, and that comes from God, and you believe that you're going to die. Like God He cannot raise you from the dead if you do die, and God cannot keep you from dying, right? So we see here a lack of faith, and that undermined God's promises. God would bless the whole world through the firstborn son of Isaac, but Esau didn't believe like that. He was in a large sense, he was carnal-minded and distant from God. There's a second issue that I pick up here with Esau. Esau was an impulsive actor. He was impulsive, right? As he did not value his birthright over a bowl of lentil stew, by his actions, Esau demonstrated that he does not deserve to be the one who continues Abraham's responsibilities and rewards under God's covenant, since he does not have the steady and the thoughtful qualities which are required. His impulsivity in that moment reveals that he wasn't capable. He wasn't the right person to take over the family leadership, and especially in the family's relationship with God. And there's a third problem that I have with Esau. Esau wasn't worthy of being a patriarch in the line of Abraham. We see later in his life that he married 2 Hittite women. Now, this was a direct violation of God's injunction and Abraham's will to marry women from among the Canaanites. These marriages, the text says, were a vexation to Rebekah and Isaac. You can read that in Genesis 26, 34 to 35. Now, that act alone disqualified Esau from being the bearer of patriarchal community or continuity. In the story further, Isaac was prepared to pass on the birthright to Esau, so Esau could still have taken on the patriarchal continuity. But acquiring foreign wives meant the detachment of his children from the Abrahamic line. So in other words, because he took wives from the neighbors, took wives from the Canaanites, it meant that his lineage wouldn't be the pure lineage of Abraham, and that automatically disqualified him from becoming the heir of the promises. Now, what are the lessons that we can take out of here? I'd like to draw this lesson to a close by asking the so what question. What does this story have to do with trials, and what can we learn from it? I would like to suggest that Esau found himself here in a trial. When he came in from the field, he was in a difficult position. He was tired and he was hungry. That is a trial I go through every day. Trial and hunger. Food and hunger, right? It sounds simple. It's about food. But I think it's important to look at. Remember that Satan also tempted Jesus with food. We mustn't underestimate how our lack of physical restraint can alter the course of our lives. So I've drawn 3 lessons out of Esau's trial that I think might be valuable to us as we are going through a trial. First of all is this: pause is better than impulse. Pause is better than impulse. Jacob looks like the thinker. Esau looks like the actor. Someone once said, most of the problems in life are because of 2 reasons. We act without thinking, or we keep thinking without acting. Esau followed his impulse. He acted without thinking. He followed the sounds of his body, the moaning of his gut. He did not think. He was hungry and he acted. Sometimes when we are in an uncomfortable space, most of us, we want to act out and get rid of the discomfort and not think carefully. I would like to suggest that when we find ourselves in an uncomfortable space, all we need to do is pause. And pause means stop and think. Or I've made an acronym of this. Park action until the situation is evaluated. Park action until the situation is evaluated. That's what pause means. Just park for a moment before you do anything. Think about the situation. Evaluate it carefully before you act. Whatever discomfort you're experiencing right now, be careful of your impulse to act. Be careful of your instinct. Park and think first. Secondly, if priorities are not concretized, your actions can easily be compromised. If priorities are not concretized, your actions can easily be compromised. The problem that Esau had was that he had not really thought things through. His priorities was a mess. How could you sell the great honor of being a patriarch for a bowl of lentil soup? Right? We need to concretize our priorities, which means that we should know exactly what it is that we will do and will not do, regardless of how we feel or in what situation it is that we find ourselves. Right? Why? Because our impulses are too strong for our judgment sometimes. Do not do things you have not thought about. Do not always act on impulse. Higher parts of the brain should be consulted too. God gave us a spirit of self-control, and that's what separates us from the beasts. And so we need to have a clear understanding in our minds of what our priorities are, and they need to be concretized in our being. We don't shake on those. We don't move on those. We don't compromise those. It should be decided beforehand. I'll give you a very simple example. Teenagers. A teenager that has made up his mind that he will not lose his virginity before he gets married, or a female makes up their mind, I will not lose my virginity before I get married. That person has concretized that decision. And it doesn't matter how great the temptation is when that person is with boyfriend or girlfriend, they've made up their mind. It's not going to happen. But a person who's not sure about it, who says, yeah, I would like to stay a virgin until I get married, but a person that's like wishy-washy about their priorities and about what it is they stand for and believe, when they get into the moment of temptation, they're going to give in. And that's exactly what happened here with Esau. In that moment of weakness, he hasn't really prioritized before that he wants to fall in line with his father Isaac and have the same relationship with his God. No, he didn't prioritize it. It wasn't an important thing. So when the moment of temptation came, when the difficult situation came and his stomach was growling, it was a wishy-washy decision for him. Okay, I'll sell it for a bowl of soup. You see how your body and a small temptation in your body can affect your most important directions in life. And the third thing is something that I've already briefly mentioned in the lesson, but it's this: your actions reveal your faith. Your actions reveal your faith. Esau's actions revealed his faith and his trust in God. In fact, it seems like he had no relationship with God. Following our impulses doesn't reveal faith in God. It reveals our own lack of restraint to fleshly desires. Before we act, we should always be mindful of this. What would this act say about my faith? And so whatever it is that we are facing this week, whatever lies ahead, whatever challenges lie ahead, ask yourself the question: how should I act that will reveal to God the depth and strength of my faith? May God bless you. Have a super week. Love you guys. Bye.